Hello and welcome to another episode of Metal Effort. My name's Nehemiah, and today we're going to be looking at this piece of metal, the Spyderco Native 5. This is on loan from my buddy Yvonne. He works with me, and he was checking out my YouTube channel and actually got into knives. So this was his second knife he bought since he officially got into the hobby. I think he had a little kind of $25 knife from before that, but I introduced him into the world of knives and he dove right in. First thing we'll do is a size comparison. We've got our Spyderco Pair 3, which we're going to have a little Spyderco sandwich here, and our Spyderco PM2. So, pretty small knife. It's this very similar profile to the Shaman, just kind of shrunk it down, or rather the Shaman is a scaled up version of the Native 5. It's a good length. It's a little bit longer than like their smaller options, like say a Dragonfly or something like that, but just a little over 2.5 or a little under 2.5 cutting edge, and not quite 3 inches, just a little bit underneath that. Good size for EDC for sure, though. I think it's a decent option for that kind of thing. Next, we'll do a quick weigh-in. This is coming in at 2.43, so under an ounce an inch. The lightweight Native 5 is definitely holding up to its name of lightweight, which is a good thing, obviously. With the objective stuff out of the way, let's jump into our dent, the decent, the excellent, the nitpicks, and the terrible of this piece of metal. First off is that lightweight weigh-in that we just did. So it's a lot lighter than even it looks. It kind of almost feels like a plastic toy or something. It's just so lightweight, but as far as sticking it in your pocket and being able to forget about it, that's definitely facilitating that. So it's good that they're doing as much as they can. There's no full steel liners like there are on, like, say, a PM2 or a Pair 3 that has the steel going pretty far back, which obviously adds to the weight of this. So that's good. It's pretty much just the blade and the pivots, the hardware, and the back lock, and that's pretty much the only metal bits. There's not even a washer. The washers are non-existent. It's just being pushed directly up against FRN, which is fine. I mean, it's just one more thing to shed some weight. Next thing I like is just this classic Spyderco leaf blade shape. So this has been proven to be an incredibly just practical little shape. You get a little tiny bit of flats, a lot of belly, good point. There's kind of a swedge going down here, so as far as like penetrating cuts into clamshell or anything like that, you should be good to go. It's a good little utility blade for sure. I also like the jimps on the knife. They matched it up pretty well. They did some jimps here at the top of the back lock, and then when you open the knife, they kind of join together. They do a pretty decent well of matching up. Like, you can tell, but you have to get pretty close. So it's just kind of an interesting design choice that they're like, oh, hey, if we only have jimping on the actual blade, that might not be jimping enough. So just adding that little extra bit of jimping to make sure that you're locked in. There's obviously jimping on the bottom finger choil, and so overall, it's connected to your fingers, and it's not slipping off of you. You have these very unique kind of FRN bi-directional kind of outside scale, which keeps that knife locked in as well, which I appreciate. As far as the lockup, even though this is not stock full of steel, the lockup feels like it's bank vault tight. I mean, it's just zero blade play, and it is super duper locked in. So if you're worried about durability, I don't think you really need to worry about it on this particular knife. I think just durability wise, like, I can get no flex in this no matter what I do to it. So very, very well designed, durable little hunk of plastic and metal. Another thing I like about backlocks is that they're totally ambidextrous. So not only do we have the clip being reversible for left or right hand, but you also have tip up or tip down placement too. So all 4 positions are available to you, and you're going to have equal access to that lock back regardless of what hand you're using. So completely universally ambidextrous, which is an awesome thing. Fit and finish on this knife is pretty solid. As far as like it's centered, there's not really any gaps to be spoken of. It's pretty much good to go. I mean, it's a pretty basic knife. I don't know, I'm sure they could mess it up, but the design is so tight that it makes it easier, I'm sure, to finish the knife, and they pulled it off. Now let's get into excellent. First excellent thing is the ergonomics. The ergonomics are excellent. So classic pinch grip, having that finger choil right above your thumb, just really gives you that control. You're very close to the edge of the blade without, any fear of like getting onto the blade. And then, deep finger kind of placement holes here, grooves. It fits. It's, with the finger choil, even large hands can grip onto this no problem, even though the actual cutting edge is kind of on the smaller side. Having the finger choil facilitates so much more space. There's really no harm or worry of having a bigger hand not fit. It's just pretty much good to go, I think, for most hand sizes, so not an issue. Next excellent thing is probably one of my favorite things, and that is the steel type. This particular one, the yellow with the black hardware, is a part of the Salt series, and they're using LC200N. So LC200N is nigh unrustable. Theoretically, it is possible, but highly unlikely. It just, on this channel, it's hard for me not to always just kind of drone on about the benefits of LC200N. I think most of us kind of know what's going on with it these days, but it's good to see it on something in this package. I think it just makes sense. Whether you're cutting into apples in the lunchroom, you're taking it to the beach, and you're going on a hike, and it's raining or snowing or whatever, this is just going to be kind of your little lightweight EDC, doesn't matter the situation, you can throw it in your pocket type of knife, and this steel is the perfect steel to match to that kind of lifestyle. So H1 is going to be much more dull. You're going to have to sharpen it a lot better. So just comparing it to the other options out there, I think, Vanix is probably better than LC200N after all said and done. But, that's going to make this little knife that's normally $120 be like $250. So I think in the practical sense, LC200N is probably the best steel possible for this knife. Last excellent thing, and this seems kind of silly to make, an excellent point on, but I think it's so good that it needs to be extended to the rest of Spyderco's lineup. So this kind of laser etch, I don't know if it's actually laser etch or not, but basically, depending on when you look at how you look at the blade, it kind of like can disappear, and it's not just like a normal black etch. Now, it's not just the aesthetic difference. I think there's a practical difference too, that, the Spidey little icon right here and the little spider guy, you can kind of feel it. It's got some texture to it, and it just, it's friction when you're cutting through stuff. It's not like a big deal, but it's not as smooth or as clean as what this one is. This one you cannot tell at all. It's not noticeable in the slightest. So not only do I think it looks cooler, kind of almost like a holographic kind of shimmering in the light, but I think there's the practical purpose too. And it's clean. It almost looks like futuristic. And so I think this is the type of finish for, the logos and the steel types and all that stuff, to just put it on all the Spydercos, guys. I mean, that's really, really good. Whatever you did, do it on everything. Knife has a couple nitpicks. First one, the clip is functional. It's definitely a practical clip, I suppose. But it's like incorporated into the lanyard hole, which, I don't know, I'm just not a huge fan of. The lanyard hole is really far down, which means that to match the lanyard hole, the clip is really far down. You can get secondary, clips, but obviously this clip is going to have to be above it, unless you get some really crazy clip that kind of like makes it deep clary and goes around the hole, which is just kind of like unnecessary hoops to kind of jump through. So I'm not a huge fan of it. It's incredibly shallow carry. I mean, so much of this knife is kind of sticking out, and just the bright yellow and the black, it's going to make it more obvious. So it might not be as low key of a carry as you might hope. You can dye the scales to make it not so obvious, but teach their own. I'm just not a huge fan of it. Last nitpick, and I mentioned this on most Spydercos, is I kind of wish they had just a little tiny sharpening choil. Over time you're going to get a little bit of a smile there, and it's just kind of hard to sharpen all the way to the back. I know it removes some of the cutting edge even more, because we're already making tons of room to facilitate the finger choil, so it's a lot to ask, but it's something that people can do on their own if they have the right tools. It's not like the biggest of deals, but I'm going to keep mentioning it. Next up is the terrible, and I have some things to talk about. So we're going to do our OCD section in the terrible this time. OCD is open, close, and disengage. It's the part of the review where we kind of zone in on the action of the knife. Now, I'm a big proponent of like good action. I just prefer it. I don't have to have it in every single knife. If a knife presents enough to me in terms of functionality, size, and just overall utility, but the action sucks, I might be able to make it fit into my collection depending on what attributes it's bringing to the table. This knife could probably fit into that category, but before we get to the conclusion, let's kind of go over this. So on the opening, we've got a Spyderco, obviously. As far as being able to flick it out, it is impossible. It cannot be done. This was pretty tight and pretty bad action when I got it. And optimistically, I was like, I'll get in there. I'll lube stuff up. I bet I can make it better. And I cleaned it out. It wasn't really dirty. Lubed it up. And it made no difference. It's exactly the same. And it's like really, really, really tight. Even if I loosen up the pivot to where there's blade play, it's still, you've got this backlock just jabbing into the tang of the blade. And so just by virtue, and you can kind of see what's going on in here, the backlock is just pushing with all its might right onto that tang of the blade. And so it's never going to win any action awards. It's just by nature of the design. Opening, it's kind of like a Sebenza open. It's pretty much your only way. It's you're like deliberate. You have to do full power all the way through. And it's just, it's not going to ever flick open. I mean, even like the slip joint, it feels more like a slip joint in terms of just overall pressure. It's just more even. All right, so disengage. Disengage is probably the better of the three in the sense that it's just loose enough that if I pull back on the lock back, I can kind of give it one jostle and get it to close. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be able to even make this like a one-hand open and close. But you're able to get it just enough to where you can kind of rotate your position and then push it with your finger to close it one-handed. Otherwise, if it didn't do this and it just stuck straight out, I would have to hold it and then with my second hand actually close it. So it's barely limping over the one hand open and close finish line, which is kind of a low bar to say the least. As far as the close, it's you could do this all day and it's just never going to drop, no matter how many jostles you do. So in terms of close, it's you have to push it all the way. You have to get it until it actually snaps into the detent position. So it's all around pretty bad. I mean, it's definitely not something the knife is trying to do well. So I'm not, gonna knock too many points off of this. So before you freak out, make sure you stick around for the conclusion, because we gotta kind of take all these elements and distill it. So let's get into the conclusion. This is a good knife. I like this knife a lot. As far as like the important bits of, is it a good blade shape? Is it a good steel? Can it cut? The answers are all yes. As far as, can I put it in my hand, use it comfortably? Of course. Ergonomics are great. So in all the practical ways of you having a knife in your pocket to get things done, like a tool, this meets all those bare minimum requirements and passes them quite well, in fact. As far as abusing this knife, it's going to be difficult to do. I mean, you don't want to pry or do anything crazy, but this lock back, is super strong, so it's going to take a lot for that to come apart on you. It's lightweight, and it's going to be easy to find with the bright colors. So in the practical senses, it's awesome. Now, in the more kind of subjective, like knife collector realm, where you have multiple different knives and you want to experience, different locking mechanisms, different actions, different opening apertures, that kind of thing, this is going to be toward the bottom of your list as far as, really astounding action, or it doesn't even have to necessarily be action that's bringing to the table that makes it kind of unique or carves its spot into your collection. But, you take something like a PM3, or a Para 3, I should say, it's got the fidget factor, and overall, you know, it's a very similar package to what's going on with the Native 5, especially since the Para 3 came out with a lightweight version. I think ultimately I would have a hard time picking this over the lightweight. The only reason that I'm not running out and buying a lightweight Para 3 right now is because I'm hopeful that they'll come out with the LC200N version of it, which kind of takes the best of both of these knives and could combine it into one knife. So I'm talking about a knife that doesn't exist yet, so keep that in mind. If you're in the market for a knife and you got to buy one right now, I would say if you're looking for just ultimate, you know, utility, kind of idiot-proof, low maintenance, get the Native 5, especially with the LC200N. If you're looking for something that's going to be a dependable, reliable knife, but still has a little bit more pizzazz in terms of, you know, the fidget factor, probably want to pick up a Para 3. They're, you know, kind of different knives. You know, this is kind of like the miniature PM2, and this is the miniature Shaman. So they're just kind of smaller knives of, you know, the big burly ones. But it's kind of a similar breakdown between the two. The only difference, the Shaman being, you know, this general shape, much larger, but with a compression lock. So kind of taking the best of both. The locking mechanisms really do widen the gap between the two different models. So really, this just has the lightweight advantage to a normal Para 3. So I think it would have more points if the lightweight Para 3 didn't exist. But since that does exist, and presumably there's going to be more steels coming out, as soon as you get a steel type that you're really excited about into the lightweight Para 3, I would probably point you in that direction. For the time being, though, this is a solid knife, and I think nobody would regret purchasing this knife, and I think it's a really, really solid option for most people. So I hope this review was helpful to you. Thank you to my friend Yvonne for loaning the knife. I appreciate that. Catch you in my next video. Bye!